Now, there are concerns that the plan by the military to release another set of repentant terrorists into society could subvert the progress made so far in the war against insurgency. No fewer than 613 rehabilitated terrorists undergoing de-radicalization are scheduled to be handed over by the military authorities to their respective state governors. This has, however, heightened fears that the repentant terrorists may have ulterior motives. The ex-terrorists were among the 800 people who were recently integrated into Bama community in Borno State and were resettled at the government girls' secondary school in Bama. In July of 2022, some repentant Boko Haram members, despite renouncing their membership of the terror group, were accused of having contact with their former colleagues. Well, former Nigerian Army spokesman Brigadier General Sani Usman joins us now to look at the implications of the planned release of the reformed and repentant terrorists on the nation's security and the war against insurgency. Good afternoon, and good to have you on Newsday with us. Thank you for joining our conversation.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on your program.
Well, on the heels of the insecurity that has plagued the country for many, many months, and recently just this attack on the train station in Edo State, what are your thoughts on the arrangements as they have been made, and whether or not those who are supposedly repentant will not cross back to the other side and cause trouble?
Well, first and foremost, my sincere sympathy to the families of the victims and, of course, those that have been abducted. Then the other thought is the issue of, repentant Boko Haram terrorists. But let's take them one by one. First, the issue of arrangement after what happened last year in Kaduna, and we heard what happened in Edo over the weekend, is quite unfortunate. That goes a long way to say that we have to go back to the drawing board in the securing our infrastructure, particularly transportation by rail. Possibly there could be connection between what happened in Kaduna and what happened in Edo. But it's only a thorough investigation that can unravel that. But that notwithstanding, and I think we need to put our acts together to ensure the perpetrators of this crime are apprehended, and we make, put more security in place to ensure that it will not occur again. Then talking about the issue of repentant Boko Haram terrorists. One, you have to look at the recruitment pattern of the Boko Haram. Over time, we have had this problem for the past 12 years or more. And over time, some of them have surrendered and some of them were captured. Some of them, were captured, they were not having arms. And by the time somebody surrenders, there are international obligation, international law that oblige the military to treat them humanely. And you cannot in any way kill all of them. Rather, you have to put them through, the rigors of the judicial system available in the country. In our own case, it is the normal thing, except for other legislation that makes, the Terrorism Prevention Act, they are going through the normal processes. But in their own wisdom, the government and the military came up with, the Operation Safe Corridor for those who are not involved and those who were, who voluntarily, gave off the fight. And you cannot kill them, and of course you cannot keep them in detention. Therefore, you have to work out a mechanism. That brought the idea of having Operation Safe Corridor, in which some of them, after due clearance, they undergo
training and rehabilitation. Now, the process, the most critical aspect is the issue of reintegration back into the society. Before you do that, first and foremost, you have to sensitize the society, and that is why I understand the fear and the apprehension of Nigerian society, given the number that are graduating, and they will be, be taken back or handed over to their respective state governments and the families. Now, putting things in place, that includes buying, getting the buy-in of the people, because you cannot have such buy-in if there is no justice. And justice here, it is justice for the, victims, and in fact, even to perpetrators of the crime themselves. Then, what are those monitoring mechanisms? If you have rehabilitated them, what are you doing to ensure that they are properly being monitored, to ensure that they will not go back, or somebody will not entice them into any criminal activity, talk less of terrorism act. So these are the issues at hand, and I know that they are doing the best they could, because recently I know there was a seminar or a conference at the defense headquarters in which there was a sensitization of the stakeholders. But beyond the military, I think the government has to take the issue very seriously. Take, for instance, now we have about 83,000, repentant Boko Harams in the northeast, particularly in Borno State. They are being catered by Borno State government and the military. What are the resources available to Borno State? What are the resources available to the military? I think the federal government has to come out with a unique way of, sorting them out, determine the level of culpability, ensure those that are culpable go through the justice system, then others that are not, that can easily be redeemable and rehabilitated, they should also go through the process of, rehabilitation and later reintegration into the society. And of course, you have to condition the society to understand that we cannot kill all these people that are involved. There are some of them actually were captured and were forced into, Boko Haram terrorist activities. So they have not taken part in most of the atrocities committed by the Boko Haram. But of course, there are some of them that are, committed heinous crime, and the people even were able to identify them when they came to attack or ransack their villages, or they know who killed who. So in such instances, justice should take paramount. Should be a priority, against the integration. But of course, after all said and done, we cannot kill all of them, because some of them actually, so to speak, are innocent, of the charges or the accusations against them. But a thorough investigation will determine that.
Brigadier General Usman, last year, July, there were allegations that some repentant Boko Haram Boko Haram terrorists were communicating with their former colleagues. It was an allegation, it was never proven. But how do we measure the sincerity of the repentant terrorists or ensure that they do not go back to their old ways?
That is exactly what I'm saying, the issue of monitoring and ensuring that, the devil, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. These are people, initially, they were good people before, they go into, they went into the activities of terrorism and insurgency. And some of them had been there for almost 10 or less years. So it is not easy, you expect them to go back, even if they have not participated in the various heinous crimes committed by the Boko Haram. They were just victims. That notwithstanding, psychologically, they have been indoctrinated to a particular way of life. So you have to think of how best you, rehabilitate them. Apart from rehabilitate, you have to train them to go back into and psychologically prepare them to go back to life, normal life. But beyond that, how it is not just enough. You have to equip them to go back into that life. But they cannot go back into that life all by themselves alone. The society has to, give a helping hand. The people that are receiving them, and of course the security agencies, they must have a monitoring system in which these people, apart from, being integrated into the society, to what extent are you evaluating their activities among the societies? What is the reporting mechanism, either on weekly basis or monthly basis, quarterly or yearly, as the case may be, to satisfy? It's just like people on parole, so to speak, when serving jail time, when they are eligible for it. So to what extent? So we have to test that. Nigeria is faced with a unique problem, because this number of repentant Boko Haram is quite much that it has never happened anywhere in the world. We have had instances in other parts of the world. Take, for instance, even in West Africa, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and of course, not too long ago, in Rwanda, they came out with a unique system of, but justice took place. You remember the Gachacha system. But now, up to now, there hasn't been much, in terms of whole society approach to the issue. It is only the military. It is only the military and the Borno state government that is catering for them. And unless we come out with a mechanism that will take care of that, but of course the issue of justice should take, priority. Then of course those monitoring and evaluation, monitoring and checking on them to ensure that those allegations are not proven.
Brigadier General, you were speaking earlier about the buy-in from the public and how important it is for the public to also understand and maybe help in the integration efforts as the government is doing its own part to integrate these repentant Boko Haram terrorists. But as a member of the public myself, I'm unaware. I'm not very familiar with the term repentant Boko Haram terrorists. What we do know are people who go to jail or are criminals and get pardoned every once in a while by the government, etc. This would be on a much larger scale. And in order for my brain to make that jump, I would need to understand exactly what goes into the minds of these people who are going to be reintroduced back into society, since there is quite a gap. Those individuals that you say are training these individuals in order to ascertain their level of repentance, their level of wickedness, etc., their level of reintegration back into society. What is their level of training? Who are the people that assess these individuals? That could maybe help better with the buy-in, so that we can understand there can be some kind of level rubric or playing field that the public can understand, and it can make the process seem a little bit more transparent, because right now it's mired in a little bit of confusion, and as we know, confusion leads to fear. Is there any way to make that process more transparent in terms of the checklist of things to look for, human behavioral criteria that are checked off in order to say this individual is someone who is reformed and can come back into society, and these are the people that are certifying them as so?
Yeah, that is why at the onset I said I appreciate and understand the concern of the members of the public in respect of that issue. Even myself, I'm also a member of the public. But I can understand, so you can imagine you are so concerned in faraway Lagos. Talk less of those people who are direct victims of this insurgency and terrorism acts in Borno, Yobe, Adamawa, Gombe, Bauchi, and Taraba. So you can understand the concern or the feeling of the public. Therefore, the issue of sensitization is very important, and so that people will understand that we cannot in any way, lump all these people and kill them. The level of involvement in the insurgency varies from one individual to another. But talking about the rehabilitation program, there are professionals, sufficiently qualified people that talk to them, and talking about psychologists, clergies, law enforcement agencies, and other people that are versed in entrepreneurship and what have you, other skill acquisitions programs and so on and so forth. But I think there is more to be done in terms of enlightening the members of the public, to understand what is going on and the direction, and most importantly, the issue of justice, and then, of course, the issue of forgiveness, so that these people can be reintegrated, those that are not, deeply involved into the atrocities committed.
Well, thank God you've been talking about the issue of justice, because I'm wondering if we should actually be talking about rehabilitation of terrorists when we have not talked about justice. So I'm happy that you have acknowledged that there is indeed a need for justice. But at the same time, I'm also wondering, should we be talking about the rehabilitation of terrorists when all IDPs have not yet been settled? Shouldn't they be the focus instead of the terrorists? This gives the impression that the federal government, or perhaps the military, they're pampering the terrorists while they are hitting hard on agitating groups like IPOB and all others. What about jailing them? You said we can't kill all of them. Agreed. But what about jailing them to serve as a deterrent to other terrorists who might decide at some point in time to also surrender and get rehabilitated?
That is why I kept on hammering on the whole society approach. You see, when you are faced with a security challenge of this magnitude, it is not just enough that the security agencies should be left with their own devices. Take, for instance, even the issue, even though it's federal government-led, but the issue of Operation Safe Corridor, it was the initiative of the military. And, the government later on had a buy-on and all the rest. But, of course, it was as a result of pressure. We have had instances of so many of these NGOs, talking about high-handedness and all the rest. Therefore, a mechanism has to be devised. And that is how we came about that. But that notwithstanding, there are issues involved. Take, for instance, the issue of the IDP. It is not even the IDPs as a result of insurgency, but we have IDPs as a result of banditry, and the kidnappings, that are happening, especially in the northwestern part of the country. So we ought to have a mechanism that take into cognizance of the peculiarities of the IDPs and those repentant Boko Haram terrorists. And of course, the key thing is the issue of whole society approach. When other people are thinking of rehabilitation and compensation for the IDPs, and resettlement, people should also be thinking of rehabilitation and integration of this repentant Boko Haram terrorists, bearing in mind justice is served not only to the victims, but of course even to the accused themselves. So I kept on saying that we are faced with a unique situation that has never happened, that is most unprecedented. So we have to come out with the best practice, that uniquely suit our own, peculiarities. Unlike what we had in Rwanda, unlike what we had in Liberia or Sierra Leone, as the case may be. Our own case is unique because the number is so much. And what are the resources? I don't think if there is even provision for, budgetary allocation for this. But yet, Borno State is doing the best it could, and the military is doing also the best it could to ensure that they are catering for these people. But for how long will they cater for them? Therefore, there is need for the government, particularly the federal government, to wedge in, possibly have a committee to clearly, screen these people, determine the level of their culpability, and determine the next line of action, which of course justice should take precedent. Then those who are eligible for, rehabilitation and integration should go through. And those who will face justice, the judiciary will definitely have a greater role to play in these instances, depending on the level of culpability. And of course, I know that there were instances they were complaining of lack of evidences. Take, for instance, what evidence do you require from someone who confessed to the fact that he was the one who killed his father, or he was the one who led an attack to ransack a particular village or community? A case in point, there is even one of them that goes by the nickname Rugurugu. Rugurugu, is something that more or less more or less like a bulldozer that demolished. They know them. So with that kind of thing, you don't need further, evidences to convict such people. But of course, everybody in Nigerian context, of course, the criminal justice system, the onus is on the person that is making the accusation to prove the guiltiness of the person. So automatically, we have to be mindful of the rule of law if we are also doing all these things. But that notwithstanding, justice must be served both to the victims and to the accused. And by the way, almost everybody in Nigeria and beyond is also a victim of this insurgency and criminal activities.
And speaking of those peculiarities that we face within Nigeria, specifically in the north, as you mentioned, seeing as communities often know who their miscreants are, or they know who their individuals are, defining a community, just like you explained with the example of the bulldozer here. Is there a way, or does the government plan on using these repentant or reformed Boko Haram insurgents as for counterinsurgency? Is that something that is that you can discuss? How will they be used? Can they be used to actually fish themselves out?
Well, first and foremost, you look at the program of Operation Safe Corridor. How is it going, and what the processes are? But secondly, again, I don't speak for the government, and that is why I am suggesting that there should be a whole society approach to the problem, so that this issue is dealt with more urgently and decisively. They have been repenting for the past 6 months or more, and yet they are just there in various holding areas. What plans do we have? So the government ought to come out with plans. And by the way, there were investigations, series of reports, I think, that need to be revisited and dusted, and possibly they will form the basis of the way forward.
Well, just before we let you go, I'd like you to speak to us in clear terms and tell us exactly what the benefit, of giving them, of holding out this olive branch is. Is the Nigerian military getting any quality information from the repentant terrorists that could help them better discharge their duties? Will this rehabilitation, will it lead to lesser terrorist attacks? What exactly are all the Nigerians benefiting from this program?
Well, first and foremost, if you look at the issue of this large number of, surrender or repentance by Boko Haram terrorists, is not something that happened overnight. Over time, there were psychological operations being carried out in which, take for instance, in those days, there were a series of accusations of high-handedness on the part of the security forces of this country. But of course, they had to think of other non-kinetic approach to the issue of dealing with to the issue of insurgency and terrorism, hence the psychological operations, and initially some of them that volunteered, they were being coerced and told that once they come out, they will be killed and all the rest, a lot of people. And it may interest you to know, there are some unscrupulous elements, even on the part of the society, that are in contact with some of them, that they should not come out, they will kill them and all the rest. They want to perpetuate the insurgency. But that notwithstanding, the good always carry the day, hence the number of people repenting. And of course, it is the information that they give that help the military and other people to also understand what is going on in the civilized world as against what they are going through. Of course, coupled with the fact that there was a concerted effort, continued onslaught, cutting off their supply routes, denying them logistics and what have you, that they were faced with no option other than to surrender. So it's a combination of so many things. So the benefit, of course, this kind of thing couldn't have happened if you do not extract information from some of them as regards to their disposition and what have you. But beyond that, again, the public have been most cooperative and understanding now, unlike in the past, that they help with information. It may interest you to know, in those days, we have had instances where people will claim to go to, their farmlands, take for instance this pesticides, spray machine, not knowing that actually it wasn't the pesticide that was inside. Usually they are logistics, they are food items. When they are coming back, you will not see them with it again. But all those things have been, are no longer there. So it's so much information is being gotten from them, as regards to this activity. So there is also benefit, being gotten from them, in terms of information and what have you. But given what the Nigerian society stands to benefit, that over time, even Colombia, that had been fighting insurgency for 58 years, at the end of the day, they had to opt for a non-kinetic settlement to the problem. So we cannot go on, with the kinetic operations without mixing, the non-kinetic aspect. So that the bottom line is to have a more peaceful and more secured Nigeria. So anything that will lead to that, so long as it has not gone contrary to, laws of the land, I think it is a good thing. Therefore, Nigeria will also benefit from it.
Nigerian Army spokesman, retired former Sani Usman, thank you so much for joining us and for joining this conversation with us this afternoon.